Welcome to 108 Idea Exchange, a space where peers, leaders, and pioneers across association and nonprofits learn together by sharing what's actually working and what's quietly breaking behind the scenes. The show is brought to you by 108 Idea Space because of our work, that is rooted in the association space, and we try to bring those realities to you when we know that association teams are lean, the expectations are big, and there's a constant push to deliver more value with less friction. I'm Manny, the host of 108 Idea Exchange and the growth strategist at 108 Idea Space. This episode is especially for all those executives, operation leaders, and member leaders who are responsible for proving member value in a world where attention is so short, choices are infinite, and trust is harder to earn. And before getting on this podcast, our guest and me, we were talking about, a problem everyone's tackling. Member value isn't a list of benefits, it's an experience. And experiences either pull people in or quietly push them away. So we'll talk about how member value is in action today in this world, how to build experiences without chasing perfection, and what's the next best action. And to do that, our guest today is Stephanie Denvir, um, Chief Member Value Officer at Healthcare Financial Management Association, an organization that serves more than 140,000 members nationwide. Stephanie sits at the intersection of membership, learning, marketing, community, and she's living the real work of turning strategy into experiences people actually feel. Stephanie, those are so many hats. Thank you for scraping the time to be with us. I'm genuinely grateful.
Manny, it's so great to be here. I'm excited to have this conversation. I love, talking about associations, the work we do, the impact we have, and I'm excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. And Stephanie, I think your work today matters a lot. It's very timely this conversation is happening because so many association leaders are being asked to prove value in an environment where attention is shrinking, expectations are rising, and TikTok is spoiling everyone with 3-second reels. And it's hard to grasp attention, and attention is probably the biggest currency at this point. So what we wanted to do is dive deeper into a lot of those concepts. But before we dive in, what's been giving you energy lately in the work and what's been quietly maybe draining it as well?
I think, there's always been the promise of technology, right? And right now we're sitting at this point where AI, it's all we hear, right? So I think I'm excited about the promise of AI, but
Uh-huh.
at the same point, right? It's like there's so much. How do you know who to trust? How you're going to implement and scale? And I feel like while there's so much opportunity, there's also, we've got to really take a step back and think, how can we do it effectively? So
Mhm.
that gives a little pause. And when you think about that, we also have to think about the process to do that, the people. Do we have the right, people in place? And are we meeting the needs of our members by, this technology? So that's where I think I'm so energized about the promise of AI, and we're already, doing some things. But then it's like, the balance of what's possible and what's really possible, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's like there's so much potential, but then you have to think about with what we have today, what can we really do and do successfully?
That's
So
right.
I think that's, yeah.
And I wonder because there's so much going on. There's so many challenges, opportunities that goes in a leader's mind. I wonder what challenge do people most often have in their mind when it comes to building member value through different experiences?
Yeah. When we connected, and it's something I've been really focused on with my teams, is really this thought, this equation around creating the experiences for the association that drives the engagement that's really ultimately bringing member value. And so
Mm,
we've been really working on how do we enhance the experiences we're offering so that we create that stickiness, right? That people want to come
yeah.
back. And just as you said at the beginning, there's so much with whether it's TikTok, it's name your favorite social media, name your streaming platform. People are inundated with content,
Yeah.
and associations are competing with all of that content for people's attention, to educate them, right? People are going to TikTok for a lot of their education, so we're competing with that. And so I think we've been focusing on enhancing the experience so people know that they're coming to HFMA as a trusted source, to provide their, great content, networking, all the things that they need in their professional journey. And
Mhm.
so it's been an exciting time to build that out. And we're just starting that journey because there's so much potential to enhance the experiences, whether it's through learning. They mentioned we're getting ready to launch a new LMS that's really gonna bring a state-of-the-art experience for our members and their learning journeys. I'm here in Dallas for our revenue cycle conference. We're stepping up the experience we're offering to our members. So not only the way that they're learning differently, but the way that they're able to connect with their peers. We're, experimenting with some AI so that they can have access not only to content and conversations here on site, but then post event. We're
Mhm.
doing all different things to reach our members in different ways because we know everybody they engage differently. What resonates with them, it's different depending on who they are, right? We all learn differently, so we're trying to meet our members where they're at and create that enhanced experience.
That's amazing and it's fascinating. And Stephanie, what actually comes to my mind when I hear all that is you mentioned that there's no one way people learn. That everyone learns in a different way. And it's clear from what you're saying that experiences are at the top of creating member value and member engagement. When that's true, what might be reasons that sometimes association get distracted from knowing that and from what actually moves engagement? What might be some of those reasons?
Well, I think associations, a lot of times we struggle with the this is how it's always been done mentality, right?
Mm,
And right, that there's so many great traditions, but sometimes that can get in the way of, continuous improvement, advancement, because, well, this is how we've always done it. Well, but is there an opportunity to enhance how we've done it? To look at the data that our members, are saying maybe they don't want to just read the same old newsletter, right? They're
yeah,
looking for a variation of that. Or as you said, right, the attention spans are smaller and shorter. Maybe we need to condense and give the headlines and link to the articles, right? Of just looking at things differently. It doesn't mean what we've done in the past is bad. It's just we have to change to where we are today. And I think a lot of times associations gets in that rut of like, well, this is how we do it. We can't touch it. It's a sacred cow, right? And we really,
yeah,
I think we do need to all take a look at, the products, the programs, the services, and is it meeting our members where they are today?
yeah,
Or who we're trying to attract, right? The next generation,
that's
because I
right.
think some of those legacy programs don't appeal maybe to the rising leaders, those emerging professionals that we want to track those future leaders. And so, taking a step back and looking at how can we modify what we're doing or maybe start from scratch. And I think that's sometimes a hard discussion and realization to say, maybe we've got to step away from this great program, this great, you can,
Yeah,
maybe it's an awards program and we need to revamp it, or um, you know, our legacy, we've just gone through revamping all of our learning courses and updating them to modernize them, and not only creating the courses, but now in today's day, like how can we create bite-sized learning to
yeah,
be a compendium or the intro to get people, get them excited. So then they'll maybe take that full course and dive in and then take the certification. So you really create this pathway of learning. And so it's just looking at it differently.
yeah. I heard a few points here and a few things that stuck out to me. Obviously, there's the legacy or the status quo mindset that comes into play, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Then you talk about pathways and journeys, and it almost sounds like, yes, there's value in the content and benefits that you provide, but accessing or ease of accessing that value almost becomes even more important in this day and age. And we'll dive deeper into that. But when we talk about the legacy or traditions or what has been working for so long, and let's keep doing that because we have been doing it that way, versus building experiences and building those things, what's the smallest right next action, a small action that leaders can do to break out of that mindset of, okay, let's stick with tradition and relook at things from a fresher vision? What would you recommend doing the first thing when
Yeah.
someone is in that situation?
I think it's really important to look at the data. So if you haven't surveyed your members to get their feedback on how they're looking at, the programs that you're offering, I mean, there's so many different questions and ways you could slice it. I think it's important to look at just, you may think, um, this newsletter is the number one thing that members want, but are they actually saying that in the
Mhm.
way is the open rate the highest? Is the data in the survey the highest? I mean, to me, starting with the data, I think is key, because sometimes we have a perception of what we think is happening, but looking at that data tells the story. And even on top of that, even just doing some focus group discussions. I recently had that conversation with someone on our team to say, but have you actually talked to members to know this is what they want? Because let's not assume, right? Because we
Yeah,
have a different lens, than they do. And so let's
that's
actually
right.
have those conversations. So I think going to the data and actually confirming with the voice of the customer that,
Mhm.
this meets their needs, or, I think it then opens possibility to say, wow, this might actually tell a different story and where we need to go from here.
That's amazing. So I think what you're trying to say here is stay data driven, or focus on what members are trying to listen, actually listen to your members and understand how their needs are evolving, what they're trying to do. Because that's eventually who you're trying to serve, and knowing what they need will align everything else. Now, and that's a great takeaway. So, to just for the benefit of our listeners, so that they can build parallels, what are you ultimately trying to make true for your members, not as a slogan, but as a lived reality?
What are we trying to make, I'm sorry, make happen for the members from
That's right.
yeah, well, I mean, we're trying to enhance the experience so that, they have what they need to be successful. Healthcare, there's a lot going on in healthcare and it's challenging. We want to make it easy for them.
Hmm.
So, we're really trying to, just as you said, make it easy to access all of our benefits. And we're actually going through a review. Do we have the right benefits, right? Or what do
Mm.
we need to change so that our members continue to come back and we're attracting new? So ultimately, we're trying to deliver that experience and the value, to serve them and to be, to help them move forward in their day-to-day jobs, right?
Yeah.
Sharing best practices. I mean, I think there's not one thing. That's where it's really looking at that whole experience and how do we enhance it from content, events, um, our learning, and
Yeah.
community. Those are kind of the four pillars. We're really focused on delivering amazing resources and experiences.
Hmm. Stephanie, I wonder because I've heard this time and again from a lot of association folks that experience almost sounds too abstract to measure or track, right? How do you measure that member value, or perceived member value is increasing? What are the signals that you watch for that tells you, yes, we are earning trust, or member is getting the value that they need?
Yeah, I think we are actually working because we don't have a set baseline for how we're measuring engagement. And that's something in the next year we're going to tackle, because our
Mm.
data is in multiple platforms, right? And
Mm.
so it's not easily aggregated today. So we don't have like one set number that's saying this is how we're measuring value, measuring
Mhm.
engagement, and that's something we're working towards, which I'm excited about. And I think that's where, looking at all of those, how to your point of how do you measure it or how do you see it? I mean, to me, if they're returning, if you're seeing, your event that you're seeing somebody's coming back year after year, or if they're not coming back, maybe they rotate every other year, but you're seeing that engagement and you can track some of that. If you're seeing your open rates for your newsletter and the click-through rates, right? That's a signal of engagement. So I think some of those things, trying to put it all into a dashboard so that you can easily weight and determine put a criteria and a value to each of those things, and then create that value score, right? Based on the engagement. And somebody mentioned this to me, a lot of people, we talk about return on investment. Well, they said, what about return on value? And I do really think that's an important thing for associations to be thinking about. How are we offering our members return on value for their commitment to the association, right? And I think pulling some of these levers and the data points will help create that kind of that scoring, but we're not right there. So if somebody's there, I'd love to hear what they're doing. And I know you all are all doing some work in that space. So to me, I think that will help indicate where, to our earlier discussion, where we might need to make changes in our programs, right? If we're tracking and we're seeing low engagement on a certain course, over time, it may say, well, maybe it's time to either modify the course or sunset it, right? And then that, again, kind of looking at all of that to drive value for our members. So I'm excited to figure out the best engagement score and create a baseline that we can start measuring year over year. But and I know I'd love your feedback too, because you've been working on this problem.
That's right. And one thing that I typically say when we talk about member value is, value that cannot be easily experienced and value that cannot be easily tracked eventually becomes value that is hard to defend. And what I mean by that is, to your point, it's fascinating that member value only shows up for a lot of organizations in isolated moments. A conference here, a webinar there, a report here, a renewal email. Like you said, it's all in different systems. And when that happens, a lot of times, in my experience, people feel the activity, but they do not feel the continuity. And I feel eventually, when we talk about experience and member value, it's about coordination and continuity. It's almost like, finding your life partner. Date one is X experience, date two is experience number two. It's not like, okay, we met at the movie theater and now we're meeting at a park and we're starting from scratch. A lot of time when there's no continuity, every touch point seems like it's the first time. And in association context, what we have seen is, if you can bring together experience from conferences, webinars, email communication, everything of that sort, you may as well have a member who is so engaged and you don't even know. But every time you reach out to them and maybe ask for a donation for a cause or something like that, your email is going to sound like you're reaching out to them for the first time and you're not leveraging all that data that you've had for them in all those years. So I think you're right. When things are siloed, it becomes hard to track value, membership score, and things like that. And when I was searching about your organization, and I might be wrong, so please do correct me, but from the outside, it looks like the objective is to make HFMA feel more personal and easier to navigate, because serving 140,000 members means value has to be findable fast. Did I get that wrong?
No, you're right. And we're on that journey. I think what you're talking about too, it's something we're very focused on now and in the coming year, is really that personalization and segmentation. And so that when someone gets an email, it's personalized. And we're actually already doing some of that. I want to give kudos to our amazing, folks on our marketing team. They're playing with AI to pull from the data, based on their preferences, Now we can say, hey, we'd love for you to come to the annual conference, and these 3 sessions will really talk to you, right?
Oh, wow.
Based on how they've interacted. And
That's right.
there's different ways they can do it. And it's really exciting. So to your point, it makes that journey feel personal. And it
That's
should
right.
be. And so that's something I'm excited that we're diving into, as I talked about learning pathways. But to me, it's even bigger. It becomes member pathways. And
That's right.
how do you have that, you mentioned that continuity of engagement across your membership journey so that you think, I can't live without HFMA. Like they are my resource, that I have to come to, whether it's for news, articles, event, whatever it is. So the data, to your point, it really, we need to leverage it more and more for that personalization and, to be able to segment it. And we're all in this personalization, life, right? When you think about Netflix, Amazon,
That's right.
you're getting all of this information fed to you based on your personal preferences. And as associations, we need to do that to ensure engagement with our members and, taking that data a step further, right?
That's right. And because, to your point, I feel if that's not done, value seems episodic.
Yeah.
You know, every new episode is a new discovery, new plot twist, everything else. And if you think about it with Netflix, what they're good at is even though there are episodes to these series, they're keeping that continuity going on by, watch the next episode by prompting that, or as soon as you log in from your mobile device and not your tablet or laptop, there's top picks for Stephanie.
Yep.
Continue watching X and all those things. They create such an ease and experience. Now, I wonder if the real problem isn't how do we create more value, but how do we reduce the friction that blocks people from accessing the value that already exists? Because a lot of times we're so accustomed and spoiled by Amazon and Netflix of the world. So are we solving the most visible part of the problem as an industry, the association industry? And what's, something that's easiest to measure and talk about instead of what's actually driving member behavior?
I think we still have some work to do, as you said, right? I think we have to make it easier. And I think it goes to two, we've got all these different platforms we're using, technology platforms, and it automatically creates friction, right? So how
Yeah,
do we make it seamless for us as the association team, right? Who's putting in place, if it's not easy for us, it's definitely not going to be easy for the members, right? So we've got to make it easy for everybody.
yeah,
So, because I would say, and even internally, I know we have friction with kind of our platforms not talking to each other easily, right? Like it takes effort. And so then we have to prioritize, as associations, associations are a roll up your sleeves industry. We run lean with staff and you've got to do more
right.
with less. And so I do think that is an issue that we haven't solved. And we've got to I don't know how to get ahead of it, but we've got to dive in because we're at the risk of losing the engagement, as you said. I mean, I do think that's part of the problem. We hear that too. We need to make it easier for people to find the resources they're looking for.
Yeah.
And, if they have to dig after, I don't remember, I think you said to me, was it 3 seconds, five? I don't remember how many seconds that someone logs off. If they're, probably more than 10 seconds can't find what they're looking for, they're probably off and asking ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's
So,
so true. That's so true. And I so relate to that because I'm the same. Like, uh, so a lot of times I spend tons of hours on association's website going through their strategic priorities, annual reports, and things like that. And if I cannot find the annual report within the first half a minute, I'm off and I'm prompting Chat GPT to help me with that. And to your point, so my partner, she's a social media influencer. She creates fashion content, and we were going through her analytics one day, and she posted these 8-second videos. And what was the most fascinating thing to me was almost like, I mean, there's only 100% of her audience that watches that 8 second reel for 3 seconds, and then they,
Wow.
and there's only 20% of them, or maybe 10% of them, who actually spend the whole 8 seconds. So we're living in such an attention deficit time. And you talked a really interesting thing. You talked about the staff doing things easily so that they can serve the members easily. Talk to me about the handoff between, or the ping pong between staff and members. Um, you know, um, sh- please elaborate or more on that.
Yeah, I think, and if you think about associations, right, we're here to serve our members. That's why we
Mm,
exist, right? So it is a balance of, what the members want and the reality of what we can deliver. And I think that's where
correct.
sometimes we have to really be honest and have those conversations with with those member leaders that are in key roles so that they can help be champions and we can work through where there's gaps and they can be champions to help communicate it, right? Because I think member to member, some of those messages come, resonate more, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I think that's where you really have to partner with your membership and find those key leaders and champions to drive success. I mean, when I think about the most engaged members, and
mhm,
even no matter what association, whether it's HFMA or others that I've worked at, it's those volunteer leaders, it's those chapter leaders, it's, your committee leaders. They are so engaged. They, live and breathe and bleed the mission. They really believe in it
yeah,
because why would they give their time if they didn't believe in, the power of the organization? And so I think really, partnering with them and working with them collaboratively to bring, their ideas to life, for them to help bring the team's ideas and working together in a true collaboration and partnership to make the mission, move the mission forward.
yeah. And isn't that the best form of engagement metric,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah,
mean, I personally feel that engagement is in like 4 or 5 quadrants. One is the passive engagement, like opening emails, clicking on things, where there's no two-way communication.
yeah,
Then there's the active engagement where people are replying or commenting or complaining. And then there's collaboration where people work on one mission set by the association, but they're collaborating to work on it. And the final, I think, which is the next level engagement, is co-creation,
yeah.
you know, where we are working together, building a mission, like the work you do in committees, right? So um, in your world, when you look at engagement, what does good enough engagement work look like from your lens? And the reason I'm asking that is because a lot of organizations, because of AI, because of all these strategies that are out there, they dabble into multiple strategies, which may not actualize for each and every one of them. So what I wanted to dive deeper into is, what does good enough engagement look like for an organization with 140,000 members? And how can others maybe pick up nuggets from that?
Yeah, I think I loved your kind of engagement measure of engagement that you just mentioned, because when I think about it, the fact that you even can get, if we can get someone to even be a passive engager, right? To me,
Mhm.
that's good enough because at least they're doing something, right? If they're not opening anything, if they're not, going to the website, if they're not engaged at all,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to get them to come back. Or if you are,
Mhm.
they're gonna leave the moment that, if they, maybe they forgot and don't renew, but they don't see the value. So I think at minimum, you want that passive engagement. The more you can move them through that loop of engagement or whatnot, or, kind of move them up,
Yeah.
I think the more successful you're going to be. So to
Mhm.
me, even just starting to get them, because with 140,000 members, you're right, we can't be everything to everyone. And everyone also doesn't necessarily want that deep engagement. They don't all want to
Mhm.
co-create. They don't have the time for that.
That's
But
right.
if we can at least get them to be opening the newsletter, reading the magazine, um, doing, something that's showing that they're interested, I think that that's a good sign, right? And then as we can personalize it more, we can
Yeah,
hopefully move them up to beyond passive engager, right?
that's
I
right.
mean, yes, I'd love everyone to volunteer and co-create
Yeah,
content, but not everybody has that time, right? We're all so
that's right.
busy. We're balancing so many things. So to me, that minimum criteria is that passive engagement, because at least they're showing their, somewhat they're showing us that they're taking advantage of the organization and leveraging the benefits and seeing some value.
That's right. And I feel that it's true. Of course, it is hard to reach all those people. And a lot of times when I'm speaking with association executives and we're talking about technology, they say, "Hey, I inherited this technology," and I feel that sense of I'm not comfortable talking about the gaps that we have. But I feel, of course, they adopted XYZ technology in the past because it made sense at that point. And
Sure.
obviously, the membership has evolved. It's not that the technology is not relevant anymore, or the way you're doing things is not relevant anymore. It's just that things have evolved and they need a new lens. And same with members. Of course, they need to start at some point, which is either opening the emails, grabbing that value, staying informed. But over the course of time, maybe they will evolve and they will have more time, they will have more interest, they will be more better advocates, and then things naturally move forward. So I wonder, for example, for the members who are not on any of these spectrums, not on passive, not commenting, not engaging, um, where does work quietly bottleneck for membership teams? Where do people keep tripping? Where do people find the most resistance when they're trying to engage such members?
I think for us, it's email. And here's why.
Okay.
We're dealing with healthcare systems. That's the main source of our members are the healthcare system. Well, one of the challenges, security and get emails coming through and white labeling and all of that. So, oftentimes on our end, it looks like somebody got the email, but in the
Mhm.
reality, it got stopped, through the security. So if we can't deliver our, communications, that is an issue for us to drive engagement. So that's
Mhm.
something we've been working on, educating our members so that they can make sure they get get our communication, but we also try different things with, personal emails so that
Okay.
it's not, blocked because it's being sent through an email system. But that to
Mhm.
me, that's one of the biggest roadblocks. And is email even the right one, right? Somebody said to me recently, emails become, like um, old school mail, right? Like now you're just delivering it, nobody's reading it. I'm like, it's kind of an interesting way to think about it. And we've even
Yeah.
reverted back to some things where we actually send like a postcard because now, right, you don't get that much mail. So when you do, you actually stop and you're like, oh, wait a minute. HFMA
Yeah.
is having a conference. Oh, and maybe they didn't read the email. So for me, the email is one of the biggest issues we're trying to solve for. Because
Mhm.
how do we communicate effectively with our members is really the issue we're trying to solve for, through technology. And it's not just email, but that's where we seem to depend a lot on it. So we're
Yeah.
working through how do we reach our members in different ways.
Yeah, I agree, especially with such a large audience. And to your point, sometimes pattern interrupt, like you said, receiving a physical mail can change things. Um, to your point, we have worked with a lot of organizations with emails, and we look at three things. One is technically the deliverability standpoint. Second, continuity, like based on the experience or data you have on that member, how can you personalize that email? And third is the subject lines. Weird subject line, boring subject lines, two-word subject lines, and just words that almost like a VP in their company would go to a CEO, and if there's a burning fire, what's the subject line they will write, something like that. But that's amazing, and that's great context because a lot of associations rely on emails to keep their members informed and engaged. So I think at this point, let's shift gears into
Okay.
understanding, you know, the confidence gap. I call it the confidence gap. How do you measure a few other things, and how do you measure sometimes? So in the sales world, we call it the cost of inaction. Like if we know this is a gap, how do we overcome that with the least amount of risk, knowing that associations have limited resources and it's not easy to swap technologies or just rip and replace everything.
Yeah.
So when engagement challenges show up, what does that cost an association in time or trust or risk or momentum of strategic objectives? Like, is there a specific metric that every association can live by, or is it completely personalized and different for all the associations out there?
I do think, unfortunately, I don't think there's a silver bullet
Uh-huh.
for everyone to measure because every association is so different and the tools they use are different. The vehicles for which they communicate or engage members are different. So I think, there's not one way. I think it's really, again, looking at the data and assessing it. I mean, from a standpoint, my example of email. So one of the things we realized, right, is when we were looking at some of our new platform we were using for email, stuff was getting blocked because of we weren't following the processes to to get our emails out there properly, and things are getting blocked even before they went out. We didn't realize it because we're not following the rules, the email rules, right? So we made the decision to quickly, like, okay, let's work with a partner to assess where we're not
Hmm.
following the rules, and let's go in and update the process for our emails. And it was hard because we also had to say, well, we can't just send emails out to everybody all day
Yeah,
long, right? And so trying to build back the trust of through our email channel. And so we're still building that confidence in our, email metrics. And it's a process because everybody wants to quickly just go out and email everybody in the database. Well,
yeah,
then that blocks the emails from going out, right? Because
right.
we have to see the engagement from the people opening it, right? So
That's
I
right.
think I think it's everybody's got to look at where maybe they're struggling and take a minute to step back. And really, again, I think that's where that using data to really assess what's really going on here. And if you don't have the solution, going to other associations or other, industry partners to say, help me solve for this.
Hmm.
Because we don't have to do it alone,
That's
right?
right.
And so I think sometimes we can have faster results if we're learning from each other
That's right.
and can find a way to move forward. And, well, that's why I said, I don't think there's one silver bullet, but I may learn from XYZ association. They did this and, oh, but let me try that. And maybe it'll
Yeah,
help make us move faster in finding the solution.
that's right. And I hope this episode does exactly that for some listeners out there. Maybe they can just reach out to Stephanie, slide in the LinkedIn DMs, and then just message, "Hey, Stephanie, you talked about this. I want to learn more." Now, let's dive into a tiny experiment, Stephanie, for let's say a new CMVO, a Chief Membership Value Officer, or a new hire in the membership engagement department. What one tiny experiment would you recommend them doing, going back to listening to their members and understanding what they really need?
A tiny experiment. So I think one thing too, I don't know, depending on most associations have some sort of community online board, right?
Hmm.
So I think even one experiment could be if there's something that you think is the most coveted, maybe starting a discussion thread on your board to see, does anyone even respond? Or what the discussion is, right? Do you have to keep prompting? right? That could be one easy experiment to try to just see what is the voice of the customer saying.
Yeah,
I think that's an easy one that it's not a heavy lift for somebody to do. The
that's right.
other, and similar to that, if you're not, I mean, even just picking up the phone to contact a couple of different members and just say, hey, just to have some honest feedback about things. I
Yeah,
mean, go old school and actually have a conversation or a Zoom call or what, but just to make sure you're hearing from them and then maybe from that saying, let's take it a step further and do X. But I think just getting some initial true member feedback on something, that's an easy starting point.
that's amazing. So I'm putting you on the spot, so feel free to decline this question. But let's say I'm a new member engagement specialist in your team, and I'm calling a few people. What signals am I looking for?
One, do they even know who the organization is, right? And that they're a member,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because sometimes, or are they, if they are they newly expired and you didn't realize that? I mean, I think that's part of it too. So just kind of getting a baseline, do they understand who the organization is and what we offer? And I think a lot of times we find when we do these we do check-in calls with our organizational membership, we call them enterprise. And a
Yeah.
lot of times they'll say, we're looking for, and they'll name something. You don't have it. And then we're like, well, actually we do. And so it's taking the moment to point them in the direction of whatever they're looking for. Or they'd say,
Yeah.
it'd be really great if you did X. Oh my gosh, we do that. We've got a mentor program. Let me send you the link, right?
Yeah.
So I think, to be listening for what they're looking for is the other key thing to see, do we already have it and we just need to maybe communicate it differently because it's not resonating with them?
That's right.
Or did they mention something we don't have and we should start tracking our other people looking for that resource or whatever it is? So I think really just listening and finding ways to track the feedback and go in with trying to just make them have a positive experience even in that conversation.
Yeah. Let me extend on that experiment, Stephanie, because I want to make it super simple for anyone to just pick up a phone and call someone and know what to say. So here's what I want our listeners to do. If you're a new membership specialist in your organization, pick up the phone, find a member, call them and start like saying something like, "Hey, I'm the new membership specialist at HFMA. My name's Manny. Have you heard of me?" And let's let the conversation just roll like you're
Yeah,
calling a friend, and then just ask, "Hey." And the second thing that you said was, "Are they even aware of their status as a member?" So the
yeah,
first question could be, "Do you know what your membership status is and when it's expiring?" Let them answer. I
yeah,
think shut the front door at that point and let them talk. Just listen because a lot of time people just wanna let it out,
yeah.
and that can just open up so many doors. So
Absolutely,
start with
because
that.
even just I 100% agree. Even to just call, introduce yourself and say, I love to hear, what you think about HFMA or what, love your feedback. And just to your point, sometimes people just want to talk and you can get so much out of that, right?
That's
And
right.
so just to
That's
your
right.
point, just opening the door for them to open up, or if they don't, maybe have some prompting questions ready
That's right.
to ask. And if not, if they don't, and it's a short conversation, just to remind them, well, I'm here for you as a resource. If you need something, feel free to contact me. Because I think that's another thing. I even think about my own association. You're challenged to know where to go to get the information, right? And if you can't find it quickly, as we talked about it earlier on that
Yeah.
website in 30 seconds, instead of like giving up, is there someone they can go to or
Mm.
a place to help them navigate it through? And that's where you just want them to know you can come to me, you can come to the team.
That's right. That's amazing. I think this is a great experiment for someone to do this week. So please don't wait on
Yeah.
it for anyone who's listening. Now, here's what I'm taking away from our conversation today, Stephanie. I think the first thing that I'm taking away is member value isn't a benefit list. It's an experience of ease, relevance, and trust. And the second thing that I struck out was, you know, engagement is not just a marketing or membership team problem. It's an organizational design problem. Member engagement is not a department. It's everyone's job in the organization to keep it going and make it easy for people to work on. And with that takeaway, our final segment for the podcast is final five, which are like rapid fire question. You need to answer in a word or a sentence. All right. So are you ready?
Ready?
All right. So what's the best advice you've heard about building member value through experience?
I love the quote or it's how you make them feel. And so
Mm,
that's where, to me, when you think about experience, you want people to go away feeling something because that's what they remember. And to me, like that's part of associations. It's how you feel. You feel part of a community. So I think when you're building that experience, to think about how are you going to make someone feel something that
yeah,
they're going to want to, keep coming back.
that's right. That's amazing. And what would the first worst advice you've heard about engagement or maybe personalization?
That it's easy.
That's true. That's true. I guess that it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of understanding, right? Um, one belief you used to have about member value that you no longer believe in.
That it's the same for everybody. Because I think,
Mm,
just as I said, every member is different. And so I think that's one thing that everybody looks at what they value differently. And so again, we've got to try to meet our members where they're at and what is going to resonate with them. And it's not an easy task.
that's right. That's right. And one simple test or metric people can use to self-check if their experience is working or not.
I think, I mean, just as we said, even just checking in with the voice of the customer, right? Having
Mm,
those, whether it's dialogue with somebody or a survey. I mean, I think that's a simple way to just gut check, even asking just a few people,
that's right.
that's a simple way to do it. You certainly can dive into the data if you want to really get complex and figure out, how to measure it.
Yeah. And that to your point, what I just got reminded by what you just said is the NPS score. You
Yeah.
know, maybe if you have an experience, a webinar, a conference, just a one-line question to ask, would you recommend this event to a peer of yours? And that speaks volumes, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now, last question. If you could create one rule everyone followed related to member experience, what would it be?
Oh, one rule that everyone followed. That's a really one rule. To You're stumping me here, but I guess to one rule. Be open to the
Be open.
possibilities.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think,
Wow. That's great.
I mean, and that's not even, but I think we've got to, it goes back to the beginning when we said, we're steeped in tradition. And
Yeah.
so I think you don't want that tradition to blind you and take you down a path that's really a dead end. So I think you've got to be open to the possibilities of maybe something we haven't even imagined yet. And that's to me what's
Wow.
so exciting.
That's amazing. I know I put you on the spot there, but this is an amazing thing to take away because if we pigeonhole ourselves and sometimes we don't do that because our intent is not there. It's just that we're so used to doing things. It's just a habit. And changing that habit to being more open to ideas, to thinking about what could be, is I think it's a practice. So I really appreciate that rule. Stephanie, thank you again. Like this was so generous. You're so open about, your ideas, your vision. I know I asked a lot of questions, but was there something that I didn't ask I should have for the benefit of our listeners?
No, I feel like we had covered a lot, but probably we could, I'm sure, circle back again, and there's probably so much more.
Yeah.
Because as we said, there's no one size fits all, and we are in an exciting time when there's so many possibilities. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see, what the future holds for HFMA and for just associations in general.
That's amazing. And folks, I'm a very sneaky person, so I'm gonna take that as Stephanie's open to doing another episode with us. So
Of course,
stay tuned for
absolutely, absolutely.
that. So stay tuned as we launch new episodes, and we'll be back soon.